Hi, this is Mike, and welcome to Crooked Crow Crafting. Today's video will be on how I painted my Tempestus Aquilon kill team. I started painting miniatures about 2.5 years ago using the Reaper Learn to Paint kits. I think they're an excellent way to get started miniature painting. My goal is to get a tabletop plus quality, but I'm not a professional and I'm not a competitive painter. Hopefully my struggles will help you with your painting journey. I hope you enjoy the video. To test my colors, I printed out a number of these sheets. I use magnetized corks and floral pins to mount my pieces for painting. The first base layer is Vallejo US Olive Drab. I'm using the Army Painter wet palette and painting with the Winsor Newton No. 1 brush. Notice that I just don't slap the base coat down and try to stay in the lines. You don't have to, because your later layers will clean up any overpainted areas. I've been doing this to better my brush control. As the old meme goes, I put down 2 thin coats to get a good coverage for the US Olive Drab. For the shadow layer, I'm using US Olive Drab and Reaper Stormchaser Blue. I never use black to darken my shadow colors. I always use the colors that are going on the mini to create the shadow layers. This keeps the colors in harmony. Anywhere on the model where there's a fold in the fatigues or where it would be in shadow gets a little touch of the shadow color. For the fatigue highlights, I used Vallejo US Olive Drab and Vallejo Ivory White. I never use white for my highlight color as it can wash out the primary color. Any crease or raised spot on the fatigues was painted with the highlight color. It does look bright during the initial application, but it will be painted over with a wash. I try to keep the highlight color the same size as the areas that are raised. Some thin and some are thicker. Notice the brush. The paint never exceeds the middle of the belly. No paint in the ferrule. That's a big no-no. It's time for the glaze. Water is fine for making a glaze, but I think the Vallejo Glaze Medium does a better job of evenly dispersing the pigment. Here's the consistency of the glaze I'm trying to achieve. Anything olive drab gets a coat. This is a result after it's dry. You can always add another glaze coat if you think the highlights are still too bright. Now it's time for the dark blue base coat. For this, I chose Reaper Stormchaser Blue. You can see I'm still being careful to stay in the lines with my base coat. This is not a necessary step. Here you can see there is not complete coverage with the first coat. 2 thin coats is a mantra for a reason. Since the US olive drab painting is complete, I'm being careful not to overpaint with the Stormchaser Blue. It looks like I'm shaking a lot, but it's due to the speeding up of the video. My elbows are on the table and both my hands are pressed together for stability. Here's some work on the backpack, and I'm still trying to keep my paint in the defined area. I'm sure this has caused me a lot of extra painting time. There's a lot of repositioning to get the right angle to paint. Part of this is to make sure I'm pulling and not pushing the brush. Here's the backpack with 2 coats complete and a little gold trim. The gold trim is Citadel Liberator Gold. I use Citadel Iron Warrior, a darker metallic, and Leadbelcher, a lighter metallic, on the backpack. I love my Reaper paints, but the metallics leave a lot to be desired. I like Citadel Vallejo metal colors and the new Army Painter Fanatics for my metallics. I don't use my Kolinsky brushes for metallics. I use my throwaway synthetics. This brush is a Master's Touch 18.0 script liner. I'm still testing and trying to improve the video recording while painting. It's not easy. The Iron Warrior was used on the thrusters and Leadbelcher was used on the other metal on the backpack. I use Vallejo Model Air Copper for the tank on the backpack. Now I'm applying Citadel Nihilic Oxide to the copper. I tried to keep it in the edges and not all over the tank. I'm also using synthetic brushes for the technical paints. Here's the oxide complete. Only 9 more to go. Now it's time to shade the metallics with Citadel's Nuln Oil. I concentrate the oil on the edges, gaps, and depressions to enhance the recesses between pieces. Reikland Fleshshade is used for the copper and gold. Vallejo Game Color Glorious Gold was used for the Aquila. Reaper Snow Shadow is used for highlighting the blue on the backpack. I just bought some ammo Marta Klinsky brushes and wanted to give them a try here. Snow Shadow was also used for lining the backpack chevrons. I added this detail because I liked the way it looked and it was my first freehand painting. Vallejo dark rubber was used on the exhaust ports of the backpack. I then used Army Painter's Satchel Brown speed paint to add additional depth to the exhaust. It's a very subtle effect. Here's the completed backpack and a group photo. The gauges were first painted with Reaper Dragon White, then with Vallejo Game Color Fluorescent Green. The indicator dial was Reaper Pure Black. I used Pro Acryl Titanium White to highlight the metallics. I used Vallejo Model Color German Camo Black Brown for the boots. For the highlight, I combined Model Color Iraqi Sand and German Camo Black Brown. All of the leather was base coated with Vallejo Model Color Flat Earth. The first highlight was Vallejo Game Color Parasite Brown. Since I was going to add another highlight to the leather, the first one is a little thicker. Oops, mistakes happen. Out comes my trusty old cleanup brush. I used Reaper Leather Brown for the second highlight color on the leather. Not every line is perfect, but as leather is a natural material, it doesn't wear consistently. I think it's good enough for Tabletop Plus. I put too much highlight on here, but I was able to fix it by applying some Vallejo flat earth. I'm rethinking this ammo brush for edge highlighting. It's great for putting a highlight on by painting straight, however. These are the colors I used for the gun sights. Here is the color placement. I followed this excellent tutorial by Trovarion Miniatures on painting gems. I base coated the lenses with Pro Acryl Titanium White. I'm putting on the first layer, dark green. Remember, 2 thin coats. Wilderness green applied in the lower left corner. I got some of the pale green on the gray bit under the sight, so I'm doing some cleanup here with a wet brush. I'm placing dots of white at the top right corner of the lens to imitate a reflection. Now I'm touching up the Stormchaser blue around the sight. The final step is painting over with some gloss varnish. The white dots in the upper left and middle is from the gloss varnish reflecting light. Here's the back of the scope. These are the colors used for the lenses on the helmets. I painted the whole lens with Vallejo dark green, then painted a smaller circular area with Reaper Naga green. Lastly, I painted an even smaller area with Citadel Moot Green. These are the colors I used to paint the gauges on the right gauntlet. Again, I use Pro Acryl Titanium White as a base. I'm painting a small white dot to indicate a reflection. The dial indicator needle was painted with Reaper Pure Black. These are the colors used to paint the tablet on the left gauntlet. I used the tutorial from Citadel Color for this. The rest of the colors were applied in the lower left corner in a successively smaller area. For the lines, I mixed Reaper Naga Green and Vallejo Florescent Green, as the fluorescent was too transparent by itself. I used Vallejo fluorescent yellow and blue for the buttons. A coat of gloss varnish finishes it off. I painted the servo sentry with the same techniques and colors. The weapons are magnetized for swapping. The lenses were painted the same way as the gun scopes, just in red. Here's the whole team.